He always sat in my section. He would find out which section I was serving, and he would bring in marketing materials that his agency had created. And he said, "Hey, do you think this is good or bad?" And I would just give my honest opinion. And one day, maybe 3 months into this new relationship of me serving him, he said, "You really have a great eye. Have you considered maybe working as a graphic designer?"
What fuels a multi-passionate life? I'm Jessica Wan, and in this podcast, I interview people who straddle two completely different worlds. I call them Ampersands, and we are collectively designing the Ampersand Manifesto. I'm so excited to be talking with Beth Carr, brand and marketing expert and a classically trained actor who sings. Beth spent 15 years working as an actor on Broadway. On the marketing side, she's led branding and marketing initiatives for nearly 2 decades at companies like Nestle, Booksy, and Vendini. Beth started her own firm, Fortified Branding, in 2019. She's a certified StoryBrand guide and works with companies and entrepreneurs to stand out in the minds and hearts of their customers. Beth, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I have loved listening to every episode.
Oh, that's so nice to hear. We met back in 2015 as part of a Cole Porter show. As I recall, that particular show felt a bit more like singers who act as opposed to actors who sing. And you describe yourself as an actor who sings. What experiences have led you to identifying that way?
It really comes down to my training was a classically trained actor, from being here in San Francisco, going to ACT, all the way to going to one of the best universities at the time in acting, Boston University. And so I see what classical singers go through, and I admire it so much. They're able to read a chart. They're able to immediately know what the pitch is and sing so on point to that note. And they have, just like a classical actor, such command of their instrument in a way that I feel I want to give homage to that, because I was classically trained as an actor first, and singing was attached like a Lego. It was always very natural to me. And I never had that formal training that most of the brilliant singers that I know and I'm friends with, including you, have had.
What does it mean to be classically trained in acting?
It is initially a stripping down of all mannerisms and habits that you may have acquired along the way. So you're starting from a grounding and a flat foundation to be able to build on. And you are a student of theater and scripts and playwrights and words and alliteration, and you are trained to be a Sherlock Holmes almost in being able to do detective work through a script on what the playwright is trying to portray through your character, as well as insight for the audience.
Looking back to childhood, what were some signs that you would become a performer or actually an entrepreneur?
So I was raised by a single mom who was doing her best with where she stood. She was a nurse. She worked 3 different jobs, and she also had a very entrepreneurial mindset. So as she was always seeking out to make more money so that she could bring food on the table and help us survive, she opened up a nursing care agency. She opened up a child care agency out of our home. So I saw her always seeing opportunities and creating opportunities to be able to thrive, so that it also fed her family in a way that made it easier for her to be present. And then to be a performer, although I loved my mom and I am so incredibly grateful, Performing to me was a way of being seen because I felt so invisible most of my time growing up. My mom was too busy. My aunt, who also lived in San Francisco, was also a nurse. All these adults around me were way too busy. And sometimes I felt like the house plant instead of the child in the home. And so performing and being able to be on stage, all of a sudden they saw me. And it was such a validation. It wasn't until years later that I was able to realize, wow, that's where the healing that I was seeking happened, why I became a performer, why being an entrepreneur was so important, because it was about carving my own path so that I could also see myself.
That visibility was claiming your identity.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What was a day in the life like as an actor on Broadway?
So, first of all, it was really hard. Looking back, I was seeking still that healing. And at that time, I didn't really have that voice to be able to speak my mind, stand up for myself, create boundaries. And so it was really hard. I had a lot of hard time navigating that scene and a lot of challenges being able to be in community where I felt safe. Broadway is amazing and it's magical, but I think the performers that really thrive either have a deep grounding outside of the industry in friends and family and partners in other interests, or they just really don't care. They have already this buoyed up sense of self, purpose, and even a really healthy relationship with their ego where words don't hurt, criticism doesn't hurt. And honestly, at the time, I didn't have that. I was very much what I call a puddle with eyes and very, very insecure, where I identify when you see female actors out there nowadays and you hear stories or they even talk about their insecurities, I deeply identify because my identity was placed on other people's opinions, even while on Broadway. And so therefore, it was a very hard path that I didn't do well in ultimately. I failed. Well, I didn't fail. And there's a reason why I'm here now. So Broadway was a path to realize that I wasn't supposed to be there anymore. And I just so happened to be in shows that closed within 3 weeks. So to me, it was kind of a blessing looking back now. Right. And that was because I don't think I would have egotistically or mentally survived being in that environment still.
Yeah, it sounds like it's an environment that's not made for everybody. And we're here today talking about how you're an ampersand, not just an actor. How did you discover a pathway into the world of marketing and branding?
So there I was doing show after show, whatever show I could get into to bring money in. And to supplement that, I also was a bartender, a waitress, a hostess. And one of the restaurants where I played all of those roles was at this restaurant down in the Village in New York, French Bistro. And there was this one regular that came in every single night. And he would either bring his husband or he would be alone. And he always sat in my section. He would find out which section I was serving. And he always wanted me to banter with him. He loved my repartee. And he would bring in marketing materials that his agency had created. And he said, "Hey, do you think this is good or bad?" And I would just give my honest opinion. And one day, maybe 3 months into this new relationship of me serving him, he said, "You really have a great eye. Have you considered maybe working as a graphic designer if you were trained?" And I said, "Well, yeah." He goes, "You're able to creatively direct and tell stories that aren't there, but that you can see popping off these materials." And I remember looking at him like, wow, I never even thought of myself that way. But yes, ampersand. And so he said, "Come to my agency. I'm going to train you specifically how to create stories through design for our specific clients, which were all Wall Street financial houses." Merrill Lynch, JP Morgan, American Express. So after my 2 weeks of training, where it was free training for me and I didn't get paid for my time, I was able to be inserted into these financial institutions as a designer, translating what these first year analysts were bringing in big spreadsheets. And it was so freeing to me because I was not being judged for what I looked like, how I sounded, my height, anything. It was nothing about me. It was about the work. And I was still able to tell stories and be able to touch people through stories and be able to help illustrate what a story could bring in transformation. That's how I got into marketing and branding. And from there, my career grew in New York City and fast-paced ad agencies and startups to moving back here to San Francisco and continuing to lead a lot of organizations as their senior creative director and or a VP of marketing.
In your role these days as Chief Clarity Officer, I love that title, by the way, how do your skills as an actor show up?
So at our agency, Fortified Branding, we empower entrepreneurs and startups to be able to express their story through their inner monologue and elevate that with visual and verbal stories about their brand. And so acting with that investigative work of what do words mean? What is the best word to land this point? How do you invite an audience into their own story? That was a very easy translation into creating those brand scripts for brands. So if a brand were a person, how does it look, feel, sound, act? That is a very clear translation from what does my character on stage? How do they look, feel, sound, act?
Let's pause for a moment to think about this. If your company or work were a person, how would they act? Outside of hosting this podcast, I partner with leaders in the workplace as they rise up. Perhaps you've gotten a promotion, landed a new role, or taken on a lot more responsibility, and you need a trusted sounding board to support you as you support your team. I coach individuals and leadership teams to rise to the challenge with my Ampersand blend of analytical and creative. If any of this intrigues you, reach out to me at jessicawan.com. Now, back to the show. How has acting played a role in your life since you moved from New York City to the San Francisco Bay Area, and also since you no longer had to depend on acting to bring in your financial stability?
One, I appreciate really good performances beyond. Like I know when I am being delivered such a beautiful gift or moment or connection through film, theater, radio, whatever it is. Secondly, nothing is for naught in life. And what acting fed into me was also being able to clearly communicate and sell what you do, what your superpowers are. I also hold on to loving acting and performing because it connects me to being able to sell and illustrate an idea very easily and also step into visibility. And then lastly, there's always that moment where I listen when I'm invited to maybe go perform again. And so there's still that little starter flame within me, knowing that there probably is another performance in there on stage at another time.
How does it feel to perform now without as much of the pressure or a kind of critical eye on you? How does that feel?
It's very freeing. There are times, though, however, there's still a different kind of stage fright now, because the old definition in which I stepped onto stages was all about being seen and proving myself. And now with those guards off, those messages gone, it's a whole new world of what does it mean now for me?
Yeah, how would you answer that? What does it mean?
I'm still excavating that. I don't even fully know. I just know that there's more freedom, there's more breath around it all. And there's an experimentation that gives that freedom with an attitude of, I don't know, let's see, right? Let's A/B test versus this has to be really good.
Yeah. So going in with a curiosity as opposed to a perfectionist mentality.
Yeah.
So you help your clients own their words, which allows them to get to a place where they can walk into any room or onto any stage with confidence. And you have a process where you do this fairly quickly in just 48 hours. How did you come up with this process?
Most entrepreneurs that I know or small businesses, they don't have 6 weeks to wait to get their brand messaging together, to unite their teams so that everyone's in alignment and agreement on how they're going to pitch something or close deals. And so with that, and also being in community with a lot of other incredible female and queer and BIPOC entrepreneurs, I was listening and I thought, to be able to deliver something very quickly that is very complete. So brand messaging, tagline, key calls to action, an elevator pitch, a content pillar roadmap, a marketing strategy and blueprint within 48 hours from the time we do a kickoff. That is going to be such a big, impactful offer that I want to bring that into the world. And so that high touch is high ticket, and yet it leaves such an impact that we've seen so many clients be able to grow very quickly from that, from 70% new leads to closing 6-figure deals because they are no longer in their own way. And so even the return on investment is very quick from that moment that they receive all their words.
When you think back to your acting days, which, I imagine being an actor on Broadway is very fast paced and it kind of never stops. How do you think that maybe informed this kind of quick delivery, urgency? I'm hearing a lot of, large impact in a small amount of time.
We live in a world that's very fast. In a way, there's this mentality of just add water, let's go. And there are plenty of things that need to be slow and savored. And Broadway is very fast paced behind the scenes, but depending on what the story is, it can be also savored. But when it comes to business, it's not even about your brand. It's about the audience you serve, and your audiences are craving quick ways to quickly solve the pain that they are feeling. And so they're looking to you to solve it and not savor it.
Unless it's chocolate, right?
Right.
We are recording this interview right around Valentine's Day. And you've mentioned to me before how grateful you are to have picked a great spouse and life partner. How has your partner supported you on your Ampersand journey?
So when we met, he too was a performer. He also built sets for the Metropolitan Opera. He also built sets for big windows for Christmas at places like Neiman Marcus in New York City. So he too creates stories through his hands. And I think because we're both creatives, he knows that I need to express art through whatever project I'm working on. And he shows up as this really wise, grounded human that is just so talented. And, we've been together for so long, almost 30 years. I think there's also, hey, I see you're growing and you're diverging off this path that we're used to. Let me also figure out how to diverge on a path and meet you. Right? And that's been an interchangeable part of our relationship ever since we met.
That's lovely. He's also an entrepreneur, right?
Absolutely. Yes. He has an incredible craftsmanship. He has a 6,000 square foot shop. He does high-end furniture. He does commercial and residential spaces. So kitchens, libraries, hospitals, anything out of wood. So what he creates is really, really amazing.
What advice do you have for people who are pursuing or thinking of pursuing an ampersand life?
We as humans are so powerful and vast. We, to me, are the cosmos and a universe and not just one planet. And so because of that, being multi-passionate and being able to pour ourselves into those different passions is really an opportunity and a blessing, being human in these earth suits in this lifetime. And being able to add ampersands to each one of those passions is such a gift. There's plenty of people we may meet along the way through whatever has happened in their lives. They have cut off the ampersands in their life and have stuck themselves maybe in one lane. And so to be able to express yourself through these passions and be able to freely go about executing whatever that is, what's ever driving your soul, it's huge. It's a gift. And I don't think we should take it lightly.
What do you think should be in the Ampersand manifesto?
That you're enough, and that in that enoughness, that enough can be vast, and you can do many, many things that fill your heart's desire. Go test things and enjoy that.
I got chills when you said, you are enough. That was wonderful. Beth, it's been such a pleasure talking with you today. Folks, you can learn more about Beth's work at fortifiedbranding.com. If you like this show, hit like, subscribe, and share with your friends and fellow ampersands. I had a chance to listen back on my interview with Beth, and I wanted to share a few key takeaways. 1, I so appreciate the honesty and transparency with which Beth shares her story. We oftentimes think of those in the spotlight as being able to handle the criticism just because they're there. But often attacks on artists feel very personal, and we are all just humans trying to do our best. It's inspiring how Beth has been able to process her own mindset and behaviors from her time on Broadway, and to see where that's now taken her. 2, it was neat to see this theme of investigation come up in Beth's life, both as an actor and as a brand strategist. She talked about classically trained acting as being like Sherlock Holmes. And in her work these days, she's looking for clues and putting together the puzzle for her clients to tell a cohesive story. 3, the theme of visibility came up several times. First, as a way to be seen in a childhood where the adults were really busy providing for the children. Then as a profession where that visibility came with judgment. And finally, where the visibility wasn't about the personal characteristics anymore, how you look and sound, but about the ideas and the work. We sometimes ask ourselves this question, am I visible? Where the better question to ask is, how am I visible? And how do I feel about that? I'm happy that Beth has found a way to be visible that feels good and right for her.
We as humans are so powerful and vast. We, to me, are the cosmos and a universe.